Hello, and welcome to Exploring Axon, a podcast where we discuss Axon Framework, Axon Server, and their ecosystem. I am your host and a software developer at Axonic, Sarah Torrey. In this episode, I spoke with my colleague Steven van Beelen about event replays as well as tracking event processors. We also talked about what will be coming up next in the release of Axon 4.5, in addition to the tracking event processor. I hope you enjoy our conversation, and let's have a listen. Hi, Steven. Good morning. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Sarah. Happy to be back. Yeah, I'm doing fine. How are you?
So happy to have you back. Thank you so much for joining me again. It's always a nice day when I get to talk to you.
Thank you.
Today we're going to talk about one of, I guess, both of our favorite topics, especially yours since you've been working on it for the past few weeks,
Correct.
which is event replays. So
Yes.
let's talk about all of the things that you've been working on these past few weeks and more. So before we get too deep into the topic of event replays right away, let's talk a little bit about event sourcing first. I know you and I have talked extensively about event sourcing, but just to sort of do a little bit introduction before we go to different types of event processors. There was an article that I came across a while ago by Martin Fowler, which really portrays what event sourcing is and how you can replay events, which is a really nice article. So at one point, he does mention that the fundamental idea of event sourcing is to ensure that every change to the state of an application is captured in an event object. So, and these event objects are themselves stored in a sequence that were applied to the same lifetime as the application itself. So, obviously, the best thing about, not exactly the best thing, but the most obvious reason why we do event sourcing is so that we can have a log of all of the changes that have happened to the state of the application. And one of the keys to event sourcing is that we can guarantee that all of the changes to the domain objects are initiated by the event objects, and there's several benefits with that. But one of those benefits is the event replay, which is our topic today. So when we do event play, also according to Mr. Fowler, he states that if we find a past event was incorrect, we can compute the sequences by reversing it and later events, and then replaying the new event and later events, which is great because then we kind of, by doing this, we're throwing away the application state and replaying all of the events with the correct event in a sequence, which is nice. So we do this obviously in Axon Framework, which is one of the really nice things about the framework that people can use. So tracking back a little bit, let's talk about the event processors. So in Axon Framework, we do have two types, as far as I know: the subscribing event processor and the tracking event processor. So with the replay of events, we are using the tracking event processor, but I'd like for you to maybe explain what is the difference between the two, the subscribing and the tracking. And I think you do have some news on that for me as well. So if you can tell me about it, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. I think that's a good starting point because the idea of a replay, well, that rings more bells to other people. Also, if you're outside of the scope of Axon Framework, but it's good to know how we internally deal with stuff like that. So absolutely. I believe we talked about event processors in the past as well, if I recall correctly.
Yes, we did.
It's good to rehash this regardless. To give a one sentence description of an event processor. It's the technical aspect inside of Axon Framework, which provides the events to your event handling components. So with an event handling component, I mean a class containing event handlers. So the methods you would annotate with at event handler. And the technical aspect of that is, well, getting or receiving events somewhere and providing them to the handling methods. That's what the event processors do. Indeed, there are roughly speaking two types of event
Right.
processors at this stage, because we distinct in two different type of message sources. This
Right.
is the main reason why there are two types.
Exactly.
So we currently have a subscribing event processor and a tracking event processor.
Right.
The subscribing event processor subscribes itself. So this
Right.
is a form of a push mechanism, so to say. It subscribes itself to a subscribable message source,
Right.
and it receives the events as they occur at that moment in time,
Okay.
and that's it. It only gets events which happen at that moment in time, because it gets them as a push notification immediately. You could see this more as how queues typically work, like RabbitMQ. There is no storage mechanism. It's just the message is published, it's given to
Right.
a component, and it's going to handle it.
Right.
In Axon, the event bus is a subscribable message source. You can subscribe yourself to the event bus to receive those events, and then you can do with that event whatever you want, because the subscribing event processor will give it to your event handling component.
Right.
So the other one, that's the tracking event processor. Essentially, this uses a message source which it can stream from. So it tracks its own progress through the
Right.
stream. This is why it's called a tracking event processor. It
Nice.
keeps track of where it is in the entirety of the stream. It does so in a thing we call the tracking token. So essentially a position on the source, the message
Right.
source.
Right.
The message source for this guy is the streamable message source, because the message source needs to be able to provide a stream of events. This requires a dedicated storage solution for those events. So this is why an Axon, the event store interface, is an implementation of the streamable message source. This means that if you want to use the tracking event processor, you would simply need to have, a dedicated storage solution in place.
Right. Right.
This can be JPA, for example, or the Mongo storage engine, but obviously also Axon
Axon Server.
Server, because it
Yes.
stores our events for us.
Sure.
So it is a type of streamable message source you can use for a tracking event processor. Now, you already highlighted upon it a little bit. I have some news to share on this. So we are essentially, the notion of these two event processors, that might be known information for some of you. It makes sense, I think. Well, we already have this since the start of Axon 3,
Right.
which I recalled yesterday is already 5 years ago. So
Time
that's a
flies.
long time in my mind, especially in coding terms.
Yes.
We've come to the point that we feel that there is a more efficient way to track the event stream.
Right.
So we are building that. We have the tracking event processor, which does it on its own accord. It creates threads, and there's one thread receiving a portion of the stream, and
Right.
we're working on a pooled variant of this. So it's going to be called the pooled tracking event
Nice.
processor, which
Okay.
uses a thread pool, which
Yeah.
can deal with more partitions of the event stream as well. It's going to be more proficient, or efficient, I should say.
Yeah.
Hard at work on that as we speak, actually. Well,
Yes.
not as we speak. I'm speaking to you. I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
coding at the moment, but you know what I mean.
Yes, exactly. I think within the past couple of weeks, you've been really busy with that,
Yeah.
especially, getting it. So when is it? When is the release? Kind of.
Ooh,
I don't want to say date because
ooh.
we never
I never
promise
give
any days,
dates.
but
No.
do we know when and in which version it's
The
going to be
version,
released?
yes. I can definitely share the version it's going to be part of.
Great.
That's going to be the upcoming version. So we're
Okay,
currently
great.
on 4.4 of Framework, the majority of our extension, and of Server. And
Right.
we are aiming to close 4.5 soon.
Sometime this year.
I'd hope end this month, but
Okay. Okay.
that's you never know,
So my
right?
expectations are a lot like lower. Sometime this year, within the first half of
Yeah,
this year, hopefully not.
first quarter. I think
First
first
quarter.
quarter is a
Okay. Good.
given.
Good.
That should be a
That's
given at
good.
least.
Yeah. Yeah.
But hard dates, if anybody wants them,
No.
no, we don't do
Yeah.
that.
It's hard to expect that at all. I think it's totally understandable. So fabulous. I can't wait for that to come out,
Yep.
and then I'm sure we will have a more detailed talk on that as well
Yeah, sure.
when it comes out, and
Sounds fun.
we can discuss it. So can you tell me a little bit about so we can create these projections, right? And we can replay these events. Do we replay all of the messages? Can we do that? Or can we do this in command side and query side? Can you tell
Good
me a little
point.
bit more
Good point. Yeah,
detail on that?
essentially, yeah, sure, I will. Essentially, the idea of a replay when you're doing CQRS can reside in both types of your model.
Right.
Both the command model and the query model can be replayed. However, on the command model, we typically use event sourcing, which in
Mm-hmm.
essence is doing a replay always.
Right.
You're just
Right.
recreating a specific instance,
Mm-hmm.
and more specifically, based on its own events. This is the difference with the query model. The command model is an object which will likely publish events. It makes the decision to perform
Yeah.
something and notifies
Mm-hmm.
the world. So when it's event sourced, it recreates itself based on the events it has published. So we
Mm-hmm.
have a very specific portion of the event stream, which
Right.
I'd like to call the aggregate event stream because it's for
Okay.
a specific aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
This means that idea of the sequencing you also pointed out, where Martin Fowler describes in his blog, you
Right.
have that for a specific command model. So a
Mm-hmm.
specific aggregate idea,
Right.
there you have that sequence with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
on the query side of things, you don't base yourself on one specific instance of an aggregate. You could have a one-to-one mapping that the query
Right.
model is a projection of a specific aggregate instance,
Right.
but it could also be a group of aggregates or several
Mhm.
types of aggregates.
Okay.
So it reads the entirety of the stream,
I
everything of
see.
it. So this
Uh-huh.
means that there is a second sequence as well in the event stream. You have a
Okay.
sequence for a given aggregate and a
Mm-hmm.
sequence over the entirety of the aggregate
Of the
stream.
aggregates. Ah,
So,
okay.
very deep down in, if you actually look at how Axon Server stores this or how this
Mm-hmm.
would be done in a database, you see both a sequence number column and a global index number column.
Ah, okay.
So the
So
first
then
one is
how
for
does
the
it
aggregate.
exactly work with the tracking of the tokens?
Yeah, very good point. That's indeed the following step I wanted to go to.
Yeah.
So the tracking token essentially stores this global index. That's
Mm-hmm.
the position it is at in the event stream.
Right.
And well, there are different implementations of this tracking token, but in most scenarios, it's just the position in the stream. So the
Mm-hmm.
global index number of the last event it has handled. So if you're receiving a bunch of events or pulling essentially a streaming
Right.
event processor, the tracking one,
Right.
or the pulled tracking event processor, it retrieves events on its own. So it's a pull
Okay.
mechanism, really. It pulls from
Uh-huh.
the event stream,
Right.
handles those events, and then updates the tracking token, pulls new events from the event stream,
Okay.
updates, handles all the event handlers, and so forth, and goes through it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and that's the information stored in the tracking token, indeed. Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. So let's go a little bit sort of higher on the topic, higher level.
Yeah.
Why would we need to replay events? It may be very obvious, but
Yeah.
can you give me some examples of why do we need to go back and retrace these events that happened? And also, does the notion of snapshotting come to play at all?
Good point. I'm first gonna tackle that snapshotting argument
Mhm. Right.
because snapshotting for the query model is not
Hmm.
implemented by Axon,
Right.
and this is you see this idea happening a lot. People think, well, you can snapshot in Axon, right?
Right.
So I can do this for everything.
Hmm.
Well, no, you can do this for the aggregates
Right. Right.
because this is where we have that dedicated solution for event sourcing.
Hmm.
And if your aggregate just grows too big, if it has too many events, you
Hmm.
likely want to create a snapshot to load quicker.
Right.
But that's where Axon is in charge of how you deal with the recreation of your command model. The
Hmm.
query model, you can choose which type of database you use or how you're going to store it. You don't even
Right.
have to use a database. So we could build a snapshotting solution, but it would require a lot of specifics from the user as well to how
Right.
do you want to store the snapshots? Where do you want to store them at?
Okay.
Because you are given all that freedom to decide what the storage solution is for your query
Hmm.
model. So it would just be a bit too much to provide that from the internals, because that would require us to, well, likely build one for our relational databases, for
Right.
Mongo, for Cassandra, for Elasticsearch, for whatever type of storage
Whatever
solution you
you,
can think
yeah,
of.
right.
That would be an amazing endeavor, but then we would need a bigger team to work on this. So
Much bigger.
it's it's
Yes.
a it's a better use of our time if
Right.
we let the user do this, because they typically know best how to deal with
Right.
this. So
Right.
snapshotting the query model, no.
Not so much.
Your other question with that was, why would we do a replay, right? Why would we do a replay? How we tackle this in the training typically is that you have an application, you have a specific way of showing the UI, the view, which is stored as a query model. And the business has decided that after a couple of weeks in production, they need an additional column. They need more information in this query model to tackle this. Now, in older systems where you didn't have the event stream, where you only had that one model, you would, either not be able to update it, or you could update all your models by doing a type of database, an update essentially on your database. We view, however, that as we have the event stream, the basis of everything, we can simply replay. Just start from the beginning of time and recreate those query models, which apparently need new information.
Right.
This would be a valuable scenario to do this at, because your requirements changed essentially.
Right.
Or another one could be if, developer, we are all developers, right? You program something, you think it's fine, but then once it's in production, the testers also didn't spot this, but a user sees, hey, this piece over here, this isn't right, this is wrong. You think, oh damn, yeah, we coded this wrongly. We made a bug. This happens, right? This is life as a developer. So you fix the bug. Sometimes it would be more efficient to just do a database update, but they could also just replay. You fix the issue and you replay the entire event stream to correct the error you have in your models. That could also be a fair solution for a replay.
Right. Let's talk a little bit more about Axon Framework and how Axon Framework does this process of replaying the events. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And then I would like to go into a little bit of annotation, if you would like.
Sure.
But let's talk about, generally speaking, how does Axon Framework handle replays?
Yeah. So this tracks us back to tracking the tracking event processor. Yes.
Pun intended.
Pun intended, definitely. You need a place to tell the framework, I want to do a replay. There is a point where you need to state this. As the tracking event processor keeps track of its position, it's that exact position, the tracking token, which can be reverted to an earlier point in time. So if you tell a streaming event processor, like the tracking one, or like the pooled tracking event processor coming up, if you tell it to reset, you can say, I want you to reset from the beginning of time, a specific point in time, or maybe ahead of time. It's not really a replay, but you could skip events if you want. This would initiate the replay. This would mean that internally, all the tokens need to be changed to being a replay token. So there's a specific implementation of the tracking token, storing the old position and the new position, so that the framework knows how far it is in the replay. So you could actually see this if you're initiating the replay. You could go to your token entry table and see that your tokens are now replay tokens containing 2 tokens internally.
So, question.
Yeah, sure.
So the tokens that we're resetting. So do we go back to that specific token that we have? Because the annotation says reset token, right? Whichever token it is. So when replaying those events from that specific token number, right? How do the tokens, do they repeat on that same sequence of numbers? Are they now in a different version, therefore they're not exactly the same token? How does that work exactly?
So
that we don't have duplicate tokens.
Yeah. So let's assume we have an event stream of 100 events. It's stationary at that point. we have a tracking event processor which processed all those 100 events.
Right.
That means it has a tracking token stored at position 100.
Right.
Now we reset the tracking event processor to the beginning of the stream.
Right.
This means that this token at position 100 is claimed, and it is wrapped in a replay token, so that we have the token at reset, how it's called, and the token at replay, which is at position 0.
Right.
So it's this token at replay which is progressing through the stream again, essentially.
Right.
And we keep both in check so that the
I
framework
see.
knows you are replaying, yes or no. And it's that knowledge which you can use in your event handling component, which brings us indeed to the annotations you were looking for.
Yes.
Because there is a reset handler annotation, so you can annotate a method inside your event handling component to be invoked when the reset happens, so that you could, for example, clear out your database, clear out all the old tables. There's also the option to allow or disallow a replay on a method or an entire class, so that it is an actual annotation, the at allow and at disallow replay.
Disallowed, yeah.
And there is also a parameter you can add to message handling functions, which is called the replay status.
Right.
Replay status is an enumeration saying at replay, yes or no. That's essentially it. It's a replay or a live. So this.
Can I? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I pause for 1 second? So, talking about the annotation, let's go back up a little bit.
Sure.
How do we tell that, for instance, class or aggregate that we want to use the tracking event processor? Do we use that annotation at the top of the class? Do we use it for a method? Can we do both? How do you put that? Where do you put that annotation?
The reset handler annotation is an annotation you put on a function.
Okay.
So just a regular method inside your class containing the event handlers.
Okay.
This method would be invoked at the moment you tell the tracking event processor to reset.
So by using the, for instance, the allow replay, or it automatically tells the framework that we're using the this method or this annotation to replay the events.
Yes.
So it's automatically done for you. You don't have to use another separate tracking event or add tracking event processor and then allow replay or anything like that. It's already done for you. And okay, good. Okay, so that was my. But anyhow,
just to clear it out,
sorry. Keep going.
No worries. No, it's a good point, because there are like two different landscapes in here, right? You have the notion of defining what the technical aspect is of providing your events, which can be the subscribing or the tracking thing.
Right.
And then you have your event handling components, which are wrapped by such an event processor, but they on their own accord typically don't know whether their event processor is tracking or subscribing. They don't have a clue. So you could very well add all those annotations that allow and disallow in an event handling component, which receives its events from a subscribing event processor.
Okay.
It just doesn't do anything then. It doesn't react to it.
I see. Okay.
Because to react to it, the framework needs to see the tracking token.
Right.
If the tracking token, isn't there, then it simply disregards those annotations. Still means that your functions work. The event handler would still function if you have an add disallow annotation and it's part of a subscribing event processor, it would still work. There at this stage is nothing to warn you against the fact that, okay, this component has these annotations, but you're not a streaming solution.
Right.
Actually be an interesting thing to warn people about that.
Yeah.
Need to think about how to do that though. But fair point.
So then now I have to ask you this, since you are working on the pull tracking event processor, how do you annotate? Or should I wait until it comes out and then we'll talk about it? Can you give me a sneak peek?
Yeah, sure. I can definitely give a sneak peek. We essentially have decided that this pooled tracking event processor and the tracking event processor both require the same API. So they both be able to replay. This means that there is now an interface implemented by both This is called the streaming event processor. So a
Right.
bit more like we have a subscribing event processor using a subscribable message source. We now have a streaming event processor using a streamable message source. Makes that combination a bit more clear, we think, as well to users.
Yeah. Yeah.
This means that whenever you have a streaming event processor, either the tracking or the pool tracking one, you
Hmm.
simply have a reset tokens method on it.
Okay.
So, and that's it.
And okay. Okay. So that makes it easy.
Yeah.
But then kind of brings me back to my previous question. Then, how do you define it, or again, framework defines it for you, or decides it for you?
So at this stage, the framework defaults to a tracking event processor still,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
the old variant,
Right.
because and not the subscribing. We
Hmm.
used to default to the subscribing back in Axon 3 days
Okay.
because we figured this is simpler and there's no added threading involved.
No need. Yeah. Sure.
Um but essentially, everybody wants to be able to do a replay, so we
Hmm.
figured let's make tracking the default. That's what we did in Axon 4.
Right.
We're not going to switch that default to the pooled tracking event processor just yet. We want to let it be there for some time, have people use it. Maybe we will obviously figure out some issues. That's always happening, right? That's
Right.
again just the fact of being a developer, I guess. It's not
Yeah.
that I'm not doing my best to resolve almost everything, by the way. I'm not dropping this on the community,
Right.
but it's just it happens.
It's a starting point, and
Yeah,
yeah, we improve on it as we go.
exactly. But you can configure it essentially. You can
Aha.
tell
Okay. That was my
your
question.
Axon configuration. I want to register a pooled tracking event processor, and then that's based on the name of the processor, and
Mhm.
that name can also be placed on your event handling components.
Okay. But as far as the annotation goes, basically we use the same kind of annotation
Yeah.
for both pull
Yes.
tracking and then
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
tracking. Got it. Got it. Got it. Oh, this is exciting stuff. I can't wait
Yeah,
for
I'm very
to
looking
play
forward
with
to this.
it.
Yeah, it's definitely a sneak peek because typically we create an issue for things like this, which
Yeah.
is on our issue tracker on GitHub. There's
Hmm.
no issue for this. It's all in the dark. So
It's
I very
yes,
much hope people are
excellent.
going to like it. We like it at this stage.
I hope so too. I think it would be very beneficial to have it. I think it's fantastic. Yes. So we talking about tokens. I'd like to go back and focus a little bit more on tracking token position a little bit, if that's okay. So in the framework, we can use, for instance, the create head token or create tail token or create token at an instant. Can we talk a little bit about that? Can you tell me what are these used for and how can we use them?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I was already thinking whether I'd need to dive into that specific as well, but I'm happy you're asking the question because it is valuable information.
Awesome.
I like to start it off with the idea that let's assume we have an event store containing 15 years worth of events.
Right, right.
If you're doing a replay, there are plenty of scenarios you want to go to the start, but do you always really need to get to the start of that event stream? Do you need to see your old photos from 15 years ago? You
No,
know, likely not. Not in all scenarios. Maybe once in a
I'm
while
sure
when
they'll
people
pop
come
up
over,
at some
right?
point.
Yeah,
Right.
there might be short occasions where you really need to go to the start of the stream. But
Yeah.
in a lot of scenarios, just doing the last month or so, maybe 3 months
Mhm.
of events is worthwhile. This is
Mhm.
definitely when you're thinking of, or when you're using this approach, right, of being
Mhm.
able to do a replay. Discuss
Mhm.
this with your domain experts, with your business analyst to see,
Right.
okay, how far back does the query model need to go for our users?
Right.
This is something you can provide when you're doing the reset tokens operation. It's not just a reset to the beginning of time. You can define where in the stream you want to start at.
Mhm.
So you need to create a token at the position you want the replay to start. So
Okay.
this is that create head token or create tail
Mhm.
token or create token at position or through a duration. If
Mhm.
you're creating a tail token, uh,
Mhm.
this is when you go to the start. When you're doing a head token, you go to the head of the stream. So you skip any events, essentially. This could be
Okay.
used if you're having a new saga, for example,
Mhm.
which you
Mhm.
don't want to, well, start from the beginning of time, because then you're handling events from 15 years ago and starting processes from 15 years ago. Likely you don't want that. So you want it to start at that position in time where you're starting your application for the first time. Now, this creation of the token, this is also a job the streamable message source provides.
Okay.
So the event store, for example, if we go back to that, the event store is a streamable solution, but the event store also knows all its positions. So it can decide what the head token is, or what the token is at a specific moment in time.
Okay.
So this is why if you're checking the API of the framework, if you're initiating a reset tokens operation, you can be given a function. So the Lambda idea of a function where you get a streamable message source and you need to return a tracking token. The fact is, because that streamable message source allows you to create a token at a specific moment in time.
Okay, that makes sense. I did want to ask you a question, and I briefly forgot about it. But you did mention a few times that you can skip events in a replay, so that we don't always want to go from one specific point in time and then replay all of the events. We can go to a specific point in time, but then skip some events in between, and then sort of have maybe 2 or 3 different points of reference where you replay your tokens from or your events from. Can you tell me how can we do that? How can we go from say a year ago in let's say an event that happened so and so time in June, and then you get those events until like September, but then you want to skip events from September to December, and then get your events from December until like January of this year, and then skip a couple weeks and so forth and so on.
Yes, so this is quite complicated to do. You essentially want to have a form of an ad hoc replay for a very specific portion of the stream. This would, at this stage, require some custom work to do this. Definitely doable still. You just, essentially use the event store, retrieve a stream, and filter out whatever you require, really. Or when the portion of the model you require is done.
So would it be like a case for using, for instance, create a token at instant, or create token since a duration, and you give it that specific duration, and then you skip another, several months or weeks that you don't want in between, and then do another replay, create token since or with the token, and then do that again? Or am I completely on the wrong track here?
Well, I wouldn't say this is the wrong track, because it is a logical question to ask, but it is something which used to be a bit more upfront in very old versions of Axon. So with very old, I mean Axon 2. You could initiate a replay, and you could provide a criteria for which events to handle. So you could filter out whatever you didn't require, or just pick a specific time frame. The current implementation of the streaming event processor, so the tracking and the pooled tracking, you can define how far you want to go back. From that moment, it would just go through the entire stream. So really grabbing a portion out of it, that's what I mean, that it requires some custom code. The current solutions don't really do that for you. It is a question which pops up. So it is definitely something we are thinking of, how to return this, because to share a scenario when this would be handy. Let's assume we have an event stream again of 100 events, and we only need the last 50 events. We want to do a replay from the last month, and that goes back 50 events. So we do that. We start at that moment in time. Now, when you're handling events, you're either updating a query model or creating it or deleting it, essentially, being very basic. You're doing the form of CRUD operations, or CUD operations, not the what if the creation event is on position 49 and the update event for that query model is on 50? This means that your event handlers need to be smart, that in chances when you're doing a replay from a specific moment in time, they need to be aware that maybe that model isn't there. Maybe I need to derive it based on what I do know. Or maybe you want to do an ad hoc replay. And this is where that requirement you're stating that you read a portion of the stream becomes important.
Uh-huh.
And we do signal this requirement, really point it out. Essentially, if you can be, I'd like to call it lenient with your event handling. So either ignore those events if you don't have the model, or recreate whatever you do know at that moment in time. First is easiest. The latter, well, that needs to be an option. It's not always an option.
Right.
But sometimes users do want to be able to do an ad hoc replay. Definitely doable.
Right.
Might be a bit too much to discuss that
Sure.
in
In
vocals.
detail.
I'd really,
Right.
you really need to have some text and some code samples with that.
Exactly.
There are some suggestions, mostly from me, I think, out there on Stack Overflow and on our forum as well. So if you need this, by all means, go there.
Yeah.
But it is something I'd like to provide from within the framework as well.
Sure.
That you can say, okay, I want to replay this specific portion from the stream to recreate this specific model as well, because
Right.
that's what you would need it for, to do a specific model recreation from a point in time.
Exactly. The reason why I was thinking about that was when I was teaching lessons, there were times that obviously you have gaps in between the your schedule, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's holiday or school, vacation, or whatever it is, and it was not always handy to go back and look at all of the events of the past year, because I didn't care, for instance, for spring break. There was nothing going on during those several days, or Christmas break or what have you. And so cutting those portions out of my event logs basically would have been really handy to kind of go back and retrace some of the things that I needed to do. So that's that's one of those things that I constantly go back to. So how do I get rid of this sort of information that doesn't really give me any value? Do I want to stream all of those events? Do I want to get rid of them? Can I get rid of them? All of these different scenarios. There's, the sky's the limit, so you can you can come up with all these different
Exactly.
versions. Yeah. So
It
one of the
sounds
things
reasonable. Sorry for interrupting. I think it's
no,
reasonable. Yeah.
yeah.
It is. You in bare bones, you retrieve a stream, so an actual Java 8 specific of a stream, and you can filter out whatever you want. So you can do that, but it is, I think, for Axon can be a bit more kinder to providing you means to do so.
Yes. Yeah.
No.
It's a little bit easier, user friendly, I'd say.
Yeah.
And so we did talk briefly about being able to replay aggregate or aggregates. I kind of want to go back to that a little bit. When we replay a stream of aggregates, or let's actually take one aggregate, right?
Yeah.
And you want to replay the events of that specific aggregate. Do we, when we go back and replay those events? So basically, this is like, would we call it a new version? Would we give it a new version, sort of like we do with snapshotting?
If you're talking about the command model right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Essentially, when you're doing
Thank you for reading my mind. Yeah.
yeah, just being sure there, just
Yes,
I'm not
absolutely.
saying bogus. If you're replaying the aggregate, so event sourcing, I'm just gonna call it when you're sourcing your aggregate, then if you recreate it from scratch every time, so you're not using snapshots, then you don't necessarily have an aggregate version in there.
Okay.
You can add that there is an idea of an aggregate version you can attach to your aggregate, which can be used in conjunction with the command you're dispatching.
Oh,
so this is, I'm not sure whether you've spotted this, but I'm going to share it regardless. It might be interesting. Let's assume both you and me are dispatching a command for a specific aggregate, for the exact same aggregate instance. We base our command dispatching on a certain state of that aggregate. So we assume that we have fields A and B. Okay. Now, there is not really a notion of both the commands happening at the same moment in time. Because the aggregate is our consistency boundary, we ensure that only a single operation happens at a given moment in time, that everything inside seems atomic. Now, if we want to tap into the version of the aggregate, we can provide that as a target aggregate version, essentially defining the set of events which has been used to recreate the aggregate. So if we have an aggregate of consisting of 20 events, then we know we have this aggregate at position 20. So you could dispatch a command with that information attached to it. Then, as we're event sourcing, your command goes first. You your command makes some decision, adds a new field. You have A, B, and C. I dispatched the command with the thought that only A and B were there. Now, maybe the addition of C is a conflict for me. This conflict can be resolved by Axon. You can add a notion of a conflict resolver, which can see that old version you were expecting, can tell you which events have been added within your version and the current version. And you could make some decision whether it's okay to perform that operation in that moment in time. I'm not sure. So this is conflict resolvers. You can use it. In a lot of scenarios, you typically don't need this. This is pretty specific stuff. I'd wager that the documentation on it is pretty slim as well, for which I'd like to extend my apologies to anybody who now very much wants to use conflict resolvers. While we're on it. There are some sample projects I can share on the matter. So if you want some interest, just drop a question on the Discuss forum. I believe there has been a recent question on it anyhow, so you can search as well.
I think so. Yeah.
So you can dive into this. I'm, however, not sure whether this is the original question you had, because I was just firing away. Was this what you wanted to go at, Sarah?
Yes, I think so. Okay. My train of thought kind of got redirected to, but I think that was the point I was trying to get to. So I appreciate it. And sorry, I'm steering the conversation into.
That's what it is, right?
Questions come to mind, and I like to ask them, and I appreciate you taking the time to answer them thoroughly. I do want to talk about Axon Server a little bit also, because I know most of the process does happen through Axon Framework, but Axon Server does have some perks that I like to discuss.
Definitely.
So, tell me.
Yeah. So, arguably, the biggest pain point, I'm going to say the pain point, if you're not using Axon Server, is, let's assume, again, I like to make assumptions, right? Or set a stage, essentially. We have our application, and we've distributed it. We have two instances of our application for fault tolerance reasons. This likely means that the tracking event processor, or the pulled tracking, if you're using 4.5 somewhere in the future, also has two instances. It resides on both locations. When you're doing a reset, you need to change your tracking tokens, like I said. We need to be able to update all the tracking tokens. And what I mean with all is that we can segment our stream into different portions, meaning that we have, for every portion, we have a tracking token for that event processor. The replay is invoked on a single instance, not on both. So one of those instances is told to do a replay. Now, if it does that, it will drop all the tokens. It would release all its claims, meaning that this other processor can grab those tokens and start processing. That's what they want. They want to process events. And this is an issue. So because that means the replay tokens cannot be updated because somebody else has the claim. This signals the requirement that you need to stop not only one of these tracking event processors, but both. You need to stop all the instances of the specific guy, which needs to start a reset. Now, this points out the requirement of having either these instances know of one another, or you have a person up top which knows of all the instances and can tell them to stop so that one of them can reset. This is a perfect fit for Axon Server. Axon Server knows of all your connected applications, knows of all the locations where this streaming event processor resides. So this is the dashboard allows you to tell, stop all these instances, and then you can do a reset. And once that reset has been performed, meaning the tokens have been updated, then you can start them again so that they can start processing. This is definitely a large benefit of Axon Server because it is automatically that man in the middle, essentially. Whereas if you don't use that, then you need to create it yourself. It
Right.
is doable. I've done this in the past,
Yeah.
especially when Axon Server wasn't there yet. We had
Right.
to, right?
Yeah.
But it might be if you're not in the, if you don't want to build such an infrastructure component, well,
Just use
I'd
Axon
again
Server.
recommend using Axon Server. It's
So
just a bit easier.
is this also available in the standard edition, or is it only in the enterprise edition?
No, the standard edition also allows you to stop your
Okay.
processors and start them again. The sole thing which currently isn't there is
Yeah.
triggering the reset through the dashboard. And I believe you know
I
this,
knew
right?
you were gonna say
Yeah. I
that.
had to tell this.
Yes, that's actually a feature that I started actually working with our colleague Sarah Pellegrini, and
Yeah.
this was several months ago, and it's still ongoing. And yes, we will finish it so that we will have that reset button as well. That when you
Yeah.
go on Axon Server, you can use that. Yes, my apologies on that
No,
end.
no
I
worries.
got I got a little bit busy with cloud, so that's definitely in the process. So we'll get that. Hopefully for the next release we can
Yeah.
provide that.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
that would
I'm
be that
confident.
would.
It's a nice thing to work on, and it's going to bring a lot of benefit to a lot of people, I think.
Yeah,
So
I think so.
you deserve those kudos. Just take that issue and make it your own.
Thank
Say, this
you.
is what
Yes,
I've done. You should be happy because I've done this.
it's coming up. It's coming up. I promise. It
Yeah,
should be done soon, hopefully. Fantastic. So, anything else that you'd like to mention? Did I
yeah.
miss anything? Did we cover everything?
Oh, we definitely covered more than I anticipated. I figured we would just be doing replays from the query model side, but you very
Sorry,
rightfully
Steven.
so also
Surprise.
pulled in. No, no, yeah, that's good. You very rightfully so also pulled in the idea of event sourcing because it is essentially a type of replay. How that
Right.
deals with conflict resolvers, I definitely
Mhm.
didn't anticipate that question. Luckily, I know
Keeping
a
you
little
on
bit
your
about
toes.
Axon, right?
Just a tad
Yeah,
bit, right?
yeah, just a tad bit. Yeah,
No, you are the expert.
yeah. I think we
Yeah, but
covered. Yeah.
good. And
Yeah.
I that's why I really enjoy talking to you because I can pull all these questions out of my hat and
Yeah.
you know the answer, which is
Yeah,
great. And that's the point, right? So
that's what you get from years of working on the thing. I do recall one thing
good.
though. I
Yeah,
do have an additional pointer to share.
sure.
Um, this replay, when you're
Mhm.
doing it, it can mean you do need to replay everything, and maybe that is 15 years worth of events. This might
Right.
take some time, right?
Mhm.
It can be a lot of events. Maybe it are just 1 million. Maybe there are
Yeah.
2 billion. Who knows?
Right.
You definitely need to take that into account. A replay is a very strong concept. It can be
Yeah.
also pretty heavy on your application. You need
Mhm.
to be
Mhm.
cautious when you use this.
Right.
There also is an idea of improving the speed of a replay. This is, we have a blog out there called the CQRS Performance blog, if I
Right.
recall it correctly.
Yeah.
It's from a former colleague of ours, Frans van Beelen. I'm
Yes.
essentially making a revamped version of this blog to also contain a
Yeah.
code sample because
That's
I
right.
think
You're
it's
working on
just,
that.
we should have a code sample out there to show people this is how you can
Mhm.
improve the speed of a replay. This is something
Right.
I'm
Right.
working on, also tying into that I'm working on this for the last couple of months, essentially, not just
Yes.
this new event processor, also
Right.
this blog post. Because it's beneficial to see how you can enhance the speed. So I'd like to say to all the listeners, keep your eyes out. There's a new blog coming in uh,
Yes.
showing how you can do this.
And I'm actually really glad that you mentioned the notion of time because when I was preparing for our talk today, I came across the batch size that when
Yeah,
you're trying to replay a series of events, that's really important. And I came across something that was interesting because it said if you have several million events that you're trying to replay, it shouldn't take days. It should maybe hopefully take just hours
Yes.
to go through them. But I'm really, really glad that you mentioned that, because that's one of those things that I personally don't always think about. I don't think about the notion of that this thing might take some time. And so if you're thinking about doing a replay on your events based on the size of the batch that you're working with, you may not want to do it,
Yeah.
at a busy time of your application or what have you, or a busy time that you need these events going on. So that's good
Correct.
to have some buffer on that. And so thank you for mentioning that, definitely. Anyways, but thank you so much as always, Steven. It always is a pleasure to talk to you and share all of these wonderful knowledge and ideas and future
Also
endeavors
future.
too, which
Yeah.
is really exciting. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to do so. This is I very much enjoy working on Axon, but I also very much enjoy talking about all these concepts just
Yes,
aside of Axon as well, right?
absolutely.
It's been my bread and butter for quite some time, and I hope it stays that for quite some time as well. It's just too much fun.
Absolutely.
It's just too much fun. I can't stop working with
Yeah,
this.
yeah, and no, and it's good. It's good when your passion is what you do for a living, right? It's always, or hopefully, this is kind of your passion.
It
You're doing
feels
it
like it.
enough
No,
that
no.
you like it,
Yeah.
enough to want to talk about it, which is really good. So again, thank you so much, Stephen, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I hope it's beautiful over there too. It's nice and kind of fluffy snowy here. Finally, we got some
Yeah, the
snow in
snow is
Hamburg, which is
nice.
nice. Yeah, and you guys got some snow in the Netherlands too this
Yeah,
year, which is
exactly. Yeah,
not
it's
super
been quite
usual.
some time that it's been this heavy, but it makes for nice walks, and that's virtually all we can do in this period. But still,
Yeah,
it's nice,
it's
right?
good. It's good. Yeah, we were
Enjoying
a
it.
little bit jealous of you guys because you got all the snow, and it was kind of like this ring around Hamburg where everything else got snowed on, and we kind of
For real?
escaped it. But yeah, but
Ah,
we finally got some snow today, which is really exciting. So my kids were super happy
lovely.
this morning.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Anyways, enjoy this lovely day, and I talk to you soon.
Yes, have a nice day, Sarah.
You
It
too.
was a pleasure. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Steven. Please join me next time as I discover more about Axon and its ecosystem. Until then, have a great time and happy coding.